One Sheldon and Mary plot likely caused George's unexpected young Sheldon death. For 7 seasons, young Sheldon told a deeply layered story about the Cooper family, filling in the blanks of Sheldon Cooper's childhood that The Big Bang Theory only teased in anecdotes and throwaway jokes. The prequel balanced lighthearted coming-of-age humor with a thread of dramatic inevitability: George Cooper Sr's death. Long before the finale aired, fans knew George would not live to see Sheldon leave for Caltech, but the way the show handled his passing still surprised many. Rather than a slow decline or a heavily foreshadowed tragedy, George's death was abrupt, sudden, and emotionally devastating. But when you look closely, one particular ongoing storyline, centered on Sheldon and Mary, may have indirectly set up George's shocking end. This connection is subtle, buried in years of character interactions, but it provides a poignant explanation for why young Sheldon chose to handle George's fate the way it did. The weight of inevitable tragedy. From the beginning, young Sheldon was walking a tightrope. On the one hand, it was a family sitcom with a warm, nostalgic glow. On the other, it was a prequel with a built-in tragedy fans have been dreading. George's early death, a cornerstone of Sheldon's backstory in The Big Bang Theory. In canon, George dies when Sheldon is 14 years old, leaving the Cooper household fractured. The writers couldn't ignore this without undermining continuity, but they also didn't want to lean too hard into grim foreshadowing. Instead, George was written as a flawed but loving father, a man who worked hard, struggled with disappointments, but always tried to do right by his family. By the end of season 7, fans had grown attached to him in a way that complicated his death even more. It was no longer just a line of dialogue from The Big Bang Theory. It was the heartbreaking conclusion to a fully fleshed out character story. And here's where Sheldon and Mary's plotline quietly comes into play. Mary and Sheldon's bond was the core of the show. Mary Cooper was Sheldon's first and strongest anchor in the world. Their relationship in young Sheldon went beyond mother and son. It was almost symbiotic. Mary defended Sheldon when no one else could understand him, nurtured his genius, and at times coddled him to the point of alienating the rest of the family. Sheldon, in return, saw Mary as the only person who truly got him. This intense bond caused ripples throughout the household. George often felt sidelined in Sheldon's world, with his son dismissing him as unintelligent or irrelevant. Georgie and Missy, meanwhile, sometimes resented the disproportionate attention Sheldon received, but for Mary, Sheldon was her priority, even when it strained her marriage. Across the series, there's a recurring thread. Mary's choices to shield Sheldon often came at George's expense. Whether it was indulging Sheldon's quirks instead of enforcing family rules or siding with him in disputes, George frequently ended up on the outside looking in. While George loved Sheldon, he also recognized that his wife's devotion left little space for him. This imbalance planted seeds for George's eventual tragedy. The final season heightened the divide. In season 7, Mary and Sheldon's partnership became even more central. As Sheldon prepared for his future at Caltech, Mary's role as protector and supporter grew more pronounced. She worried constantly about his readiness for the world and poured her energy into ensuring his success. George, meanwhile, was at a crossroads. His coaching career was stagnant, his marriage endured strain, and his bond with Sheldon remained distant. While George shared meaningful moments with Georgie and Missy, his relationship with Sheldon never fully closed the gap. The result was a heartbreaking dynamic. As Mary and Sheldon's storyline strengthened, George was pushed further into the margins. By the time his death occurred, the show had framed him as the silent casualty of a family orbiting around Sheldon's genius. His sudden departure not only shocked viewers, it emphasized how little the Coopers had realized they were taking him for granted. How Sheldon and Mary's story made George's death inevitable. So, how exactly did Sheldon and Mary's plotline lead to George's shocking death? The answer lies in narrative necessity. George's death had to define Sheldon's adolescence. In The Big Bang Theory, Sheldon often references his father's passing as a formative wound. For that to carry emotional weight in the prequel, George's death needed to hit hard, not just for viewers, but for Sheldon himself. The show ensured Sheldon was protected by Mary to the point of dependency. George's sudden absence shattered that protective bubble, forcing Sheldon to step into the world without the balance of his father's presence. Mary's focus on Sheldon left George underappreciated. Throughout the series, Mary consistently put Sheldon first, sometimes unintentionally minimizing George's importance. Thematically, George's death underscored the painful truth. The Coopers didn't realize how much they relied on him until he was gone. Mary and Sheldon's tight-knit plotline highlighted George's quiet sacrifices, making his absence even more devastating. 3. The writers use contrast to heighten tragedy. Mary and Sheldon's relationship was stable, loving, and constant. George's death served as the brutal opposite, sudden, destabilizing, and irreversible. Without the strong Sheldon-Mary arc to act as a counterbalance, George's passing might not have resonated as deeply, why his death felt unexpected. Fans were braced for George's death, but the way it happened in young Sheldon felt startling. He didn't die during a long illness, nor after a drawn-out storyline foreshadowing the end. Instead, his passing was quick, almost mundane, a heart attack that struck without warning. This choice was deliberate. By keeping the audience's attention on Sheldon and Mary's journey, the writers lulled viewers into focusing on the future, Caltech, Sheldon's next steps, the family's evolution. George's sudden death yanked everyone back into the present, reminding us that life doesn't follow neat story arcs. And yet, the groundwork for this surprise was laid through the Sheldon-Mary dynamic. Because the show invested so heavily in their storyline, George's exit blindsided both the Coopers and the audience, reflecting the very real way families sometimes fail to see what they have until it's too late. The emotional fallout. After George's death, Mary and Sheldon's relationship took on new layers of grief and guilt. For Mary, losing her husband while being so focused on Sheldon left her with a sense of regret. Had she neglected George emotionally in favor of her son? Did she fail to recognize the quiet strength he brought to their family? For Sheldon, the impact was even more profound. In The Big Bang Theory, he rarely speaks of his father with warmth, often painting him as a bumbling, flawed man. But young Sheldon reframed this perspective. Sheldon's dismissiveness wasn't the whole truth. Instead, it was the coping mechanism of a boy who never truly processed his father's sudden death, shielded by a mother who tried to absorb all the pain herself. A story about what's left unsaid. Ultimately, George's unexpected death wasn't just a twist of tragedy, it was the culmination of the central tension in the Cooper household. By focusing so strongly on Mary and Sheldon's story, the show highlighted the quiet sacrifices George made, the distance that lingered in his relationship with his son, and the unspoken love that was never fully articulated. When George died, all those unspoken truths were left hanging. Sheldon never got the chance to reconcile with his father. Mary never got to show George that she valued him as much as she did Sheldon. Georgie and Missy never got to fully thank him for his support. That's what made his death so powerful. It wasn't just about losing a character, it was about losing the possibility of closure. Conclusion. The unseen hand of the Mary and Sheldon plot. Looking back, it's clear that the Sheldon and Mary storyline was not just a mother-son plot. It was the engine that shaped George's fate. By investing so heavily in their bond, the show made George's sudden death both inevitable and devastating. In a way, the story was never just about Sheldon growing up. It was about the cost of building a world around one child's brilliance and the quiet tragedies that unfold in the shadows. George's death was the ultimate reminder that even in a family orbiting a genius, every member matters, and sometimes the ones who seem least central are the ones whose absence is felt the most.